The dashboard clock in my car glowed 8:37 p.m., each minute stretching longer than the last. I sat there, parked across from the low-slung building of the Hillside Motel, its neon sign flickering with an intermittent sputter. The reds and blues cast eerie shadows on my hands as they clenched the steering wheel. My heart raced, a tumultuous drumbeat drowning out the rational voice that once lived in my head. That voice was now replaced by a single pulsating thought: betrayal. I can't believe this is happening, I whispered to the empty passenger seat. My voice sounded hollow, broken. I was supposed to be at home, curled up on the couch with a glass of wine and a book, not here, spying on my wife. But here I was because I had to be. Because I needed to know. When I first suspected something was off, it was just little things. Jenna was suddenly more guarded with her phone. Her work hours stretched later and later, her explanations more vague. I tried to tell myself it was all in my head, that 15 years of marriage couldn't just crumble on whims and suspicions. But then I found the receipts. A motel, a restaurant I'd never heard of, lingerie that was never worn for me. So I followed her tonight, watched her sleek silver sedan slide into this lot. She didn't even glance around, just strutted into room 114 with the confidence of someone who believed they were unseen, her heels clicking assertively against the asphalt. I had parked where I could see the door to her room, my view partially obstructed by a drooping willow but clear enough to catch glimpses of movement through the curtained window. My hands tightened on the wheel as I saw shadows dance across the thin fabric. A waltz of deceit that cut through my heart. The motel door opened again, and he stepped out to take a call, his face briefly illuminated by his phone's light. It was Paul, her coworker. Of course, it had to be him. The helpful, always there Paul. I gripped the binoculars, watching as he laughed at something the person on the other end of the line said, oblivious to the fact that his world was about to come crashing down. I wasn't just going to watch tonight, I had a plan. I pulled out my phone and dialed the number I had memorized over the past week. The number that would send everything into freefall. My finger hovered over the call button. Do it, I urged myself, my voice a harsh whisper tearing through the silence of the car. Do it now. As I pressed the call, the phone at the motel's front desk rang loudly, breaking through the night air. Paul glanced toward the sound, confusion etching his face. The front desk attendant pointed toward him, speaking animatedly. Paul's confusion shifted to panic as he ended his call and rushed back into the room. Minutes later, Jenna stormed out, her face a mask of fury and confusion. She looked around wildly, her eyes scanning the lot, grazing past my car without recognition. I ducked slightly, heart pounding, not ready to be discovered. As Jenna and Paul argued by the door, their voices raised but muffled through the distance, I felt a cold resolve settle over me. Tonight was just the beginning. Jenna didn't know it yet, but I was done playing the fool. Whatever it took, I was going to make sure this was the last time she ever betrayed me. I started the car, the engine's soft purr a stark contrast to the storm raging inside me. As I drove away, I didn't look back. I knew what needed to be done, and this was just the start. The next morning felt surreal, as though the night's events had been part of a twisted dream. My hands trembled slightly as I made coffee, the silence of our kitchen amplifying the cacophony in my mind. Jenna had returned late, thinking I was asleep. She tiptoed around the bedroom, her usual carelessness replaced by a cautious grace. I pretended to be deep in slumber, my back turned to her, my eyes squeezed shut against the tears that threatened to spill. The coffee machine sputtered to a stop, and as I poured myself a cup, the doorbell rang, a sharp, unexpected chime that made me jump. I peeked through the blinds. Standing on the porch was Marlene, Jenna's sister, her face etched with concern. I opened the door, forcing a smile that felt as brittle as glass. Marlene, what a surprise. Hey, I was just in the neighborhood. Marlene's eyes darted past me, searching. Is Jen here? She's just out for a jog. I stepped aside, letting her in. Marlene never just dropped by. She was here because Jen had undoubtedly called her after last night's fiasco. We sat at the kitchen table, the air thick with unspoken questions. Marlene took a sip of the coffee I offered her, her brow furrowed. Look, I know something's off. Jenna seemed upset on the phone this morning. She wouldn't tell me what happened, but I can guess. It's Paul, isn't it? I stared at her, a part of me relieved to finally share the burden. Yes, it's been going on for a while, I think. Marlene's face softened, her usual brisk demeanor melting into sisterly concern. What are you going to do? I don't know yet, I lied smoothly. my mind whirling with plans and possibilities. I need evidence, Marlene. Hard proof. She nodded, her lips pressed into a thin line. If you need anything, you know I'm here, right? Jenna is my sister, but your family too. Thank you, I said, feeling a twinge of guilt for involving her in this mess. As Marlene left, promising to keep an ear out for any slip-ups from Jenna, I knew I had an inadvertent ally. The rest of the day was a blur of activity. I called a private investigator, someone a friend had recommended for delicate matters. By the time Jenna came home, showered and dressed in her best damage control attire, I had already met with him and laid out what I needed. Jenna's approach was cautious, her voice soft as she entered the kitchen where I was pretending to sort through mail. Hey, can we talk? I turned, schooling my features into an expression of mild interest. Sure, what's up? She took a deep breath, her eyes searching mine for a sign of the storm she sensed brewing. Last night, I made a mistake. But it's not what you think. Oh? I kept my tone neutral, giving nothing away. It was a goodbye. I realized it was wrong what I was doing. I ended it with Paul. It's over, Jenna's voice wavered, pleading for understanding, for forgiveness. I looked at her, really looked at her, the woman I had loved, trusted, and now surveilled. I want to believe you, Jenna. I really do. But it's going to take some time. Her shoulders slumped, a mix of relief and residual tension remaining. Whatever you need, I'll do it. I don't want to lose you. As she left the room, relief visible in her posture, I felt neither victory nor peace. Instead, I felt the weight of the coming days, heavy with the tasks I had set for myself. Gathering evidence was one thing. Deciding what to do with it was another. My heart was a battleground. Love and betrayal warring within me. But one thing was clear. I was not yet ready to let go, not without uncovering the full extent of Jenna's deceit. And for that, I needed to watch, wait, and gather every shred of truth hidden in the lies. I spent the next few days acting the part of the dutiful, albeit distant, spouse while my plans quietly took shape in the background. Jenna, for her part, seemed genuinely invested in repairing the rift between us, her efforts punctuated by awkward breakfasts and tentative conversations. I watched her, always watching, my mind never quite as forgiving as my demeanor suggested. On Thursday, the investigator I had hired called me while I was at the grocery store, wandering aimlessly down the baking aisle. I got something you might want to see, his voice was low. A conspiratorial whisper that made me glance around before answering. Tell me. He's careful, but not careful enough. Caught him meeting someone at the cafe downtown. They talked for hours. Did you get anything on audio? Better. I got video. Clear shot of both of them. You'll want to see this. My heart thumped painfully against my ribs. I can be there in 20 minutes. I abandoned my grocery cart and headed to my car, my mind racing as much as my pulse. The drive to the investigator's office was a blur of red lights and honking horns, my impatience mounting with every delayed second. The office was a nondescript building tucked between a dry cleaner and a barber shop. Inside, the investigator led me to a small room where a screen was set up. He clicked the remote and the video played. There was Jenna, looking relaxed and laughing with a man who definitely wasn't Paul. This stranger was younger, more animated. My stomach twisted as I watched them, their intimacy undeniable. Who is he? My voice was steady despite the turmoil inside. Didn't get a name, but I'll find out. They're meeting again Saturday night, same cafe. Saturday. The word echoed in my mind like a bell tolling. I nodded, my decision made in that instant. I want to be there. I need to see this for myself. The investigator raised an eyebrow but didn't argue. I'll set it up. You won't be noticed. Saturday arrived with a sky the color of bruised plums, a storm brewing on the horizon as if to mirror my own inner turmoil. I dressed carefully, choosing an outfit that was nondescript yet chic enough for downtown. In the mirror, I hardly recognized the woman staring back at me. Her eyes were hard, her jaw set. The cafe was bustling when I arrived, the clatter of dishes and hum of conversation a cacophonous backdrop to my silent vigil. I sat in the corner, a hat low over my brow, sipping coffee that tasted like ash. They arrived together, laughing as they took the table in the center of the room. The investigator had done his job well. The angle was perfect. As they talked, I listened through the tiny earpiece he had given me, their words a razor slicing through the remnants of my trust. It's good to see you again, Jenna, the man was saying. I've missed this. Me too, Mark, Jenna replied, and my heart constricted at her tender tone. It's complicated, you know. With my wife, I'm trying to find the right time to tell her. The casual way she spoke of me, as if I were a mere obstacle to her happiness, fueled a cold fire within me. I waited, watched, and as they stood to leave, I followed. Outside, the storm finally broke, rain pouring down in sheets. They ran together under his umbrella, close and conspiratorial. That image, more than any whispered words of deceit, broke something in me. I approached them, my steps measured, my voice surprisingly calm when I called out her name. Jenna. They turned, surprise morphing into shock, then fear as they recognized me. Jenna's face went pale, her eyes wide. What are you doing here? She stammered. I looked at her, really looked, and then at him. I think the question is, what are you doing here, Jenna? The confrontation that followed was a blur, their excuses and apologies lost to the wind and rain. I walked away with a clarity that was as sharp and biting as the stormy night. Jenna had chosen her path, and now, so would I. As I left them behind, the rain washed away everything but my resolve. Jenna had underestimated me, but she wouldn't make that mistake again. The days that followed were a haze of cold, deliberate movements. I moved through the motions of my life like a shadow, my interactions with Jenna strained and minimal. She tried, in her own way, to explain, to reconcile, but the chasm between us had grown too wide, too deep to bridge with mere words. It was a Tuesday evening when the final piece fell into place. The investigator had called, his voice an odd mixture of curiosity and caution. You need to see this, was all he said. I met him at his office again, the room now familiar, almost comforting in its darkness. He handed me an envelope without preamble, his eyes watching me closely. Inside were photographs, not of Jenna, but of Marlene, Jenna's sister, and Mark, the man from the cafe. They were laughing, hands linked, unmistakably close. What is this? My voice cracked, the implications swirling dizzyingly. It seems your wife wasn't the one having an affair, or at least, not the only one. Marlene and Mark have been seeing each other. From what I gather, he met Jenna through Marlene. The room spun, and I sank into a chair. So Jenna wasn't lying. She was covering for her sister, the investigator finished for me, his tone gentle. Guilt, sharp and unwelcome, pierced through me. I had misjudged her, driven by my own insecurities and suspicions. I left the office with a heavy heart, the photographs burning a hole in my back. The confrontation with Jenna that night was inevitable. She returned home to find me waiting, the photographs spread across the coffee table between us. Her steps faltered, her face draining of color as she recognized the images. I can explain, she began, her voice trembling. No, I should have listened. I should have trusted you, I interrupted, the weight of my accusations heavy in the air. Jenna sat beside me, her eyes filled with tears. I wanted to protect Marlene. She begged me not to tell anyone, especially not you. Mark. He's an old friend of hers, and things just happened. And you thought you could just take the blame. Why, Jenna? Because I've made my mistakes in the past, and I thought maybe this was my way of making up for them. With you. With her. She reached for my hand, her touch tentative. I never stopped loving you. I just didn't know how to fix what I'd broken before. The simplicity of her confession, the raw honesty in her voice, shattered the last of my anger. We talked long into the night, unraveling years of miscommunications and secrets. It was not easy. The path to forgiveness rarely is. It was a start. In the weeks that followed, Jenna and I began to rebuild, slowly and with care. Marlene and Mark made their relationship public. And though it caused some familial tension, it also brought hidden truths to light, prompting healing where there had been hurt. The story of our reconciliation spread beyond our small circle, touching hearts in ways I hadn't anticipated. Inspired by our journey, I started writing my blog post about forgiveness and the dangers of assumptions gaining unexpected popularity. On a bright Saturday morning, as Jenna and I walked hand in hand through the park, my phone buzzed with an email notification. A local publisher had come across my blog and was interested in turning our story into a book, a testament to the power of second chances. As I shared the news with Jenna, her smile was like the sunrise, bright and full of hope. Looks like our story isn't just ours anymore, she said, her voice warm with promise. And as we continued walking, the path ahead clear for the first time in a long time, I realized that every story has its twists and turns, its misunderstandings and revelations. But the most beautiful stories are those that end with a beginning, a chance to start anew, armed with deeper understanding and a renewed commitment to love.